Welcome to part one of episode 44 of 84 Feet with Cady and Cap. I'm Brian Cady. Yes, I'm going sleeveless today because for whatever reason I'm a little warm in my house today. Kind of weird. Don't know why. But hey, whatever. Yeah. It is Monday, February 10th as this is being recorded. So congratulations if you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, if you're a Chiefs fan, or you were rooting for the Chiefs last night. I don't know what to tell you. I got nothing for you. Um, yeah. You will not hear any politicas. I don't know. You won't hear any politicking about the halftime show on this show. Um, yeah, we're ready to roll. We're heading into the final full week of Section 2 regular season basketball before sectional seedings come out in 12 days' time on Friday, or no, 11 days' time. Wow, I can't count. On Friday the 21st. And
Numbers are hard.
what's up?
Numbers are hard.
Yeah, math is hard. I mean, I did go to CBA where the running joke was math's as easy as 1, 2, 3, dot, dot, dot. Um,
Hmm.
that's a joke from 20 years ago. I don't even know if that it still exists for CBA. But anyways, yeah, as you see in here, Jeff Mlinar from Empire State Takeover, fresh off his travels north, south, east, and west, all across New York State from the past week. Jeff, I know you just came back from Section 5 action Saturday and Section 3 on Sunday, so you spent your time in the greater reaches of I'll say Midwestern and Central New York, we'll call it ish. Southern
Yeah,
New York. I don't know. I don't know what you want to call Section 5 technically, but all in all, I heard the trip was not bad considering the storm that came through. Overall, how you feeling and how was your travels?
yeah. Made it from the weekend from the Mohawk Valley to the Genesee Valley, and um, or before that, earlier this week, from the lower Hudson Valley up to the Champlain Valley. So welcome to New York. Lots of valleys.
And a couple of Section 2 games in between all of your travels, definitely, and the miles onto the vehicle. But we're gonna focus here on Section 2, and obviously we like usual are going to begin with Class D, but it's also going to involving a little mixing of Class C because obviously the WAC is uh, almost entirely uh, made up of obviously Northville in Class D, a ton of Class C schools, and then I believe Johnstown's the only WAC team in Class B, if I remember correctly. So you
Cool
know,
stuff.
oh,
Yeah,
and Canjo, my apologies, Canjo and
Cool,
Johnstown,
cool
uh,
stuff.
and oh yeah, Cobleskill is in B2.
The
So three
newbies.
Class B schools would usually be four, but Fonda didn't field the team this year, so obviously we can't include them. But so a trio of B schools, a lot of C's, and then a D in Northville. The trajectory of the WAC was very intriguing heading into the week as you had a triumvirate of squads tied for first heading into the week. And one school that was one game behind. I believe that one school was Cobleskill, if I remember correctly. In the end, um, what ended up happening was OESJ. Well, BKW took care of Mayfield Wednesday. Then OESJ and BKW both got wins at home Friday, which meant Northville and BKW technically tying at the top of the WAC. But because of the fact that Northville had that 7-point win at home against BKW not too long ago, that meant Northville technically wins the regular season championship in the WAC. And obviously, we have the WAC Cup coming up uh, this coming weekend. All in all, the obvious story, though, coming out of Northville, aside from that regular season conference title, Haley Monroe putting on a pair of great showings over the course of the week, including uh, reaching the new Northville High School record for career points in the sport of basketball. Not just girls and boys combined. An achievement that Bailey Brisky achieved not too long ago at Cooksaki Athens as well. So congrats to Haley. And I mean, you got to cover Haley her entire time at Northville and what she's been able to do. If I remember correctly, she came into Northville. I think it was around seventh grade, maybe if I remember correctly. It was either seventh or seventh going into eighth, something like that. All in all, your impressions of what Haley Monroe is as a player and what she has meant to that school and that program, and your thoughts about her going forward, because unless I've been living under a rock, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion about the next step for Haley at this point.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a player goes, she has she's the driving force behind reinvigorating life in the Northville program, or either reinvigorating or just creating it to begin with. Because in my time, it's not like I'm not a forever basketball historian as much as I try to be. Um, I can't tell you the last time Northville was. Yeah, I remember seeing Northville say in like a Class D semifinal, maybe at one point, but as far as like legitimately being good, contender status, all that stuff, I the last time Northville was that before Haley, it was certainly before I was doing this. So being able to just take elevate the program to new heights and be that sort of alpha in that face that hopefully can help turn Northville, hopefully is somebody that the young kids at Northville look at, and her 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 competitiveness and her approach to the game, and can turn that into just kind of a pipeline of long-term success down the road with the kids coming up. um I've been impressed with she's of course she's a dynamic talent, started has been kind of a dynamic athlete at that level for years, and has grown and refined her game over time over the course of her high school career. I was, the one time that I watched them live this year, compared to everything that I have watched from her in the past and previous years, whether it's school ball, AAU, anything else, I was impressed with maybe a more like, and the time that I watched them was one of their biggest regular season games of the year, if not the biggest, that aforementioned home game against Byrne that proves to be the difference in being the regular season WAC champ or one seed or whatever we want to call it versus being a two. I was impressed with how not just the fact that she's the best player on the court, but her approach to the game and letting it come to her, and then also having more of a feel of the stretches in which it was time to take over, instead of necessarily just trying to come out and force the issue. So I think that's big growth for her, being able to let the game come to her, and when it's time to take over, take it over. A lot of star players don't necessarily have that feel. Um, some will try to put the team on their back a little bit too early and then just get frustrated. Some will wait a little bit too long to try to put the team on their back, and then it's a little bit too late. In that game against Byrne, I thought that she kind of had a great feel of get others involved, take what's given to her. Byrne makes their run. You can see it's going to be a game to the finish. Right at about that time where I'm thinking, all right, Haley, it's got to be you for a couple minutes. It was her for a couple minutes. So having that sort of, obviously the ability to take the game over, but the feel as your alpha and your lead guard of when to set the table for others, get everybody reps, get everyone touches, create opportunities for others, which in turn makes everybody play a little bit harder. Everyone likes to have those reps and those touches. And then understanding the right time of when to change gears. That was in particular, at least most recently, what I've been impressed with. But yeah, she's the initial driving force behind the recent emergence of this Northville program, and maybe the biggest step to me, and the first step of the dominoes that have fallen in the last 2 or 3 years, and bringing Coach Zulo back and so on and so forth. But
And just the way things lined up, like I mentioned, Northfield getting the 1 seed coming out of the WAC. So, the WAC basketball crossover schedule begins tomorrow night, Tuesday the 11th, where everybody's broken up into 4 pods. The way to break it up is the top 4 seeds in 1 pod for the championship. And then pod 2 is the second set of 4 teams, so teams 5 through 8 in the standings, and then so on and so forth. So tomorrow night, our semifinals in the WAC conference play out as Cobleskill Richmondville at Northville, the one host of the 4, and then OESJ will go to Burn Knox Westerlo in the 3 versus 2 matchup. So that's how the WAC will break down. So, in the end, these have been very competitive teams with each other throughout the year. Except this will be the first matchup, if I'm seeing this correctly. Excuse me. But this gives a chance to Northville now to get a little bit of revenge, because their only loss of the season was December 6th against Cobleskill Richmondville on the road at CR. So Northville can get a sense of revenge in that regard. And then meanwhile, BKW hosting OESJ. So pair of really good games, really good matchups coming up tomorrow for that. In the meantime, we mentioned Class D. Obviously, the conversation has mainly been around who's going to be the 2, who's going to be the 3. Hartford, they are just, they only had 1 game last week, but they took care of business. They defeated Granville. They host North Warren tomorrow, and then Granville again on Wednesday. Meanwhile, the projected the other team projected to be in the running for that 2-3 matchup, or 2-3 pair of seeds, I should say. Spa Catholic, tough to go on to host Greenwich, especially given the length and height advantage that is given to Greenwich there. Spa Catholic now hosts Hoosick Falls tonight. Excuse me. Then they go to Stillwater on Wednesday in a game that was rescheduled because of the snow last Thursday. So, I guess the question really becomes, what do you weigh more here if you're sitting in the room next Friday? Are you weighing the record and the fact that Jason Johnson, the head coach of Hartford, is very much a, let's do it kind of guy when it comes to scheduling? Or do you lean more towards a Spa Catholic who, I mean, it is what it is. They play Greenwich twice. They're going to end up playing Stillwater twice by the end of this week. They've played at Mechanicville. So generally speaking, you would say if you're comparing apples to apples with Section 2 teams, you would say Spa Catholics had the harder schedule. Overall, though, I mean, obviously the dominoes have fallen a little more in the favor as far as the end results of games with Hartford. So which way do you lean? Do you feel like it's going to be a Spa Catholic number 2 or a Hartford number 2?
I mean, you can't deny that the league that Spa Catholic plays in and the Waz are in is considerably more challenging than the league that Hartford plays in. And as much as Hartford attempts to schedule up, there's kind of no making up for that in the sense that Spa Catholic has a more difficult schedule, and that can't be denied. But what also can't be denied, even though it was very early in the season, over 2 months ago at this point, Hartford owns a head-to-head.
Right.
and it was at Hartford and all that stuff. But Hartford owns a head-to-head. They beat Spa Catholic in early December, I think 62-50. It was something, 10 to 12 point game. So that to me kind of over everything else. Um, as far as strictly seeding purposes go, that's probably the fact of all facts, unless unless Northville does something, I guess, to like really screw it up in the last week. But none of their, they've won games, they've lost games. I don't think any of their losses have been particularly perplexing in the grand scheme of things. With Hartford, it's not like they've lost a game to a lower end team in the Adirondack League. They've Spa Catholic. The debate can be who's more prepared, because again, no matter what Coach Johnson and the Hartford program, no matter what they try to do as far as scheduling up non-league or seeing those other top class Ds in your non-league schedule, there's no, unless you're scheduling Stillwater twice and Greenwich twice and Mechanicville or Tamarack twice, there's just no way to simulate that, I guess, for Hartford. So who's more prepared? Who, does the whole playing 2 or 3 months, forced to play at a different speed against a different level of athlete? Does that play to Spa Catholic's advantage when they likely inevitably meet up again in a 2 or 3 weeks? Maybe. I usually go down that road of thinking, but just as far as strictly seeding goes, Hartford beat Spa Catholic earlier in the year, and I don't think they've done anything to screw it up as far as seeding goes.
And then looking at Class C, I mentioned how Greenwich took care of business at Spa Catholic back last Monday. Greenwich remains undefeated. And then Stillwater is who they are. So, I mean, the obvious assumption would be we're probably looking at Greenwich 1, Stillwater 2 for the C's. And then the question just becomes, the balance of the WAC versus the Adirondack here, because you have OESJ and BKW, your number 3, number 4 teams out of the WAC. Whitehall for the Adirondack, who just lost what was essentially the conference title game to Corinth this past week, and suffered their first in-league loss of the year, and their first Section 2 loss period actually this past week. And then Lake George out of the Adirondack as well, who I believe finishes third. Yeah, they finished third in their conference. My personal projection, I would say whoever wins between BKW and OESJ gets the 3 in the C's, and the loser gets the 4 or the 5, depending on where they decide to weigh that versus Whitehall. Is that this pretty much the same as what you're thinking at this point?
I'm not 100% sure what I'm thinking. I think the one thing that I have in my head is, if Bern beats OESJ, to me, if Bern beats OESJ again, they're the 3. If OESJ beats Bern this time around, I don't know. Maybe OESJ jumps to the 3. Maybe Bern stays the 3, since that would just mean that they have a season split on each other's home courts.
Mm.
And you look at some other things. You look at body of work and whatnot. I know that Bern has a higher whack seed for the league playoffs than OESJ does, which means they finished higher in the league. I don't know if they count these games towards like what your actual league placement is as far as which order for seeding, or if that is just determined through their regular season, like through their non-league playoff schedule. Um, that much I don't know, but yeah, I mean that's what I have in my head. Where I'm a little bit more curious at this point is because what we were talking about early in the year was Greenwich, Stillwater, Burn, Maple Hill. Um, Maple Hill has taken a dive. They just beat Chatham on Friday. I think maybe they'll be able to kind of get back on the right foot. They lost some games. I thought how they lost a couple of the games was rough, but I didn't think any of the actual just like face value the team they played against losses were bad losses for them until they lost to Watervliet on Tuesday. And then last Tuesday. And then I was like, ooh, that's kind of a rock bottom. Like nothing against Vliet, but compared to, losing to Coxsackie or Catskill or Delhi, who's good and really, really getting better out of Section 4 as the year goes on. Um, I didn't think any of them were like bad losses just against who they played against until like that Vliet loss is tough. So because of that, I'm assuming at this point they're dropping into of I don't know a 5, a 6, something in that sort of range, and their talent does not speak to that. Their talent speaks to more like a 3-4. But they might end up being somewhere in a 5, 6, 7 sort of range just because of the losses and just what the last 3, 4 weeks has looked like for them. So I'm a little curious about. I'm more curious about where Maple Hill falls in all of this than maybe I am with anything else. I don't. We would have to ask the great Tom Galvin or somebody more in the know exactly how that works. Like, does the WAC semifinal and final, do they count as far as what the league sends in for their league standings, which then dictates which order in which they're placed in the sectional brackets? I don't know that, but I think Burns, to this point, Burns made a pretty strong case for the 3. Whitehall's made a pretty solid case to just kind of playing who's in front of them. At this point, they've made a pretty solid case to be one of those, like a 5 or so, something in that range, 4 or 5 range. And then as the OESJ and Lake George, and I'm most curious about where Maple Hill falls in all of this now, because I think they're going to be in a situation where their pure sheer talent level is higher than what their seed is going to be because of how everything is just played out.
I'll throw out a very random wild card here. Just because I haven't been able to see them all year, but I've been tagged in every tweet about them throughout the year, because Chris and Pat are great like that. I'm I'm gonna put out Dwaynesburg for a hot second for a couple reasons. Number one, the site I use to check on scores and schedules and stuff also shows you in the general standings the average point differential per game from all the games this season. Do you want to take a guess on what Dwaynesburg's point differential per game is? It's a round number, by the way. There's no decimal.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably close, if not 0, because they've won some blowouts, they've lost some blowouts, and they've had some close games. 1.
+1. They average 39 points per game against for themselves, and a points per game against of 38. That's to play 18 games and have it be A, a round number, and B, that close to 0 as a round number is just wild to me. But Dwaynesburg, I mean, the reason I bring up Dwaynesburg, are they the most? Obviously, they're not the same as they were the last 3 years with the Mulherns, Alex Moses, Allison O'Hanlon, even go back to Madison Mayer. Like, obviously, not the same as going back to the last 3 or 4 years. But this is a crew that still has some players that have the experience of playing postseason ball. They still have an Ella Raymond. They still have Mia Moses. They have a team that's been there. Did that with different players in the lead roles, but at least they've been there and have been around that atmosphere before, even if it's just quarterfinal games or first round games in high school gymnasiums. At least they've been around the atmosphere before. So to me, I feel like, well, they're not going to be the biggest team. They're not going to be the most skilled team by any means in Class C, but I just feel like having that experience and having a coach that has the recent experience like Chris Herron has at those higher levels, there's a chance that you could get one of those, like you've mentioned a couple times before the season, one of those weird Fonda kind of runs where they get seeded like 9, 10, 11, and because of the way they play and the prior experience they have of being at that stage, they could be a bracket buster, so to speak, in Class C a little bit.
They could be what Cambridge was 3 years ago, which was, as Cambridge basically kind of passed the torch to Dwaynesburg. I know Dwaynesburg didn't go 3 for 3. It turned, it was like a Dwaynesburg Greenwich back and forth, but Cambridge had that run for 4 years, and the year after the Phillips twins graduated and they still had Stacia Epler and Skylar Nolan, they were in that. I don't remember exactly what seed they were. They might have been around a 10 or a 9 or something like that. And they at least made it to the point in which they played Dwaynesburg at their place. Like, I think they had to win maybe a prelim game and then a first round game to get to the quarterfinals. And then they had to go play at Dwaynesburg, and Dwaynesburg crunched them. But it was kind of like that passing of the torch sort of game where, we got the guard that won the last few years, different team, that generational class graduated, but they're seasoned enough, they make it to this point, and they get to play the next crop on their home court. Yeah, maybe we get that with Waynesburg, right? Or they get one of those sorts of seeds, and then they get a prelim, or they win a prelim, and then they, if they're in that sort of range, like a 10 or something like that, and they go on the road, they knock off that seed that's a little bit higher, and you get that sort of thing with them and a Stillwater or a Greenwich.
I'm going to try to look this up right now and see if I can find what we've been trying to find. That's states. I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to try to look it up while we're continuing the discussion. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's just going to be a matter of, I think it's just going to be a matter of how things work out in the long run, and it's just like we mentioned, it's going to be all about where everything lines up in the end with the seedings and how that's concerned. But you bring up a great point because Maple Hill, they had lost 5 of their last 6 before beating Chatham back on Friday. They host Kip Troy Prep um, in a non-league in a non-section 2 game actually tonight, and then they go to Cairo Durham, a game that was originally scheduled for January 3rd but got rescheduled. I'm going to assume that's because of weather. That's been rescheduled to this Thursday, so that's how they're going to wrap up their season before we get to sectional seedings, I should say, next week. All right, moving to Class B. Going to start quick with Corinth, the team that defeated Whitehall in that Adirondack League de facto championship, essentially. They finish up 1-0 in conference play. They're currently sitting 12-6 overall, 11-5 against Section 2 teams. Based on everything I'm looking at, they're around 7th as far as standings are concerned in Class B, but they're in a weird mix because right above them, and what I'm looking at is Greenville, which means you got to weigh the Patroon Conference schedule versus Adirondack. Then right below them, you can make real good cases for Voorheesville and or LaSalle to be over them because they're Colonial Council schedule. So let's just start there real quick with Corinth. Where do you feel they fit in to the general Class B outlook when it comes to sectional seedings in a week and a half?
Well, they get 2 more on the schedule because Adirondack League is another league that also does playoffs. So they have semifinals tomorrow where they'll play Warrensburg, and then I'm not even sure it was on the other side. Would it be Lake George and
I mean, here's
Hartford, Grant?
I would assume, yeah, I would assume it'd be Whitehall versus Lake George or Hartford. Yeah, I'm thinking Hartford because Hartford has the hand over Lake George.
Let's see. Yeah, so tomorrow that is Lake George goes to Whitehall, and tomorrow, as we speak, it's Monday right now, Monday, February 10th. So on February 11th, yeah, Lake George goes to Whitehall, Corinth hosts Warrensburg. If the bright side is they have potentially 2 games against the other top Adirondack League teams. And if they win those, and if they get 2 more wins, maybe they're able to boost their status a little bit in that regard. But they're not going to be looked upon. I anticipate them not being looked upon too favorably in Class B seeding because when you look at their non-Adirondack League resume, they lost pretty handily to Stillwater, but a lot of teams have. But they lost pretty handily to Tamarack as well, which that one is probably more specifically one to circle because that's Class B versus Class B, Wazzer and Adirondack. And it was at Tamarack, difficult place to play, and it was on the Big Red Day, but that was a pretty lopsided loss. So I don't think that they're without having the actual record placement in front of me, I don't think they're going to be looked at too favorably, especially in comparison to your Colonial Council teams and your upper to mid-level Wazern teams. But they have pieces. I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, they haven't necessarily put it together every game in, game out. which that's growth. They're a pretty youngish sort of team. They have some level of experience, but they like last year they graduated Emily Dingman, who was an all everything for them for a number of years. So it's a matter of new roles, establishing new roles and getting comfortable in them throughout the year. And Whitney Cameron establishing as more of a leader throughout the year, which that's an adjustment. It takes time, and there's nothing that can simulate that besides actually going through it. So they've had their ups and downs in a sense in that regard. Just as far as I've watched them multiple times, and it's not about my favorite word, consistency. It's not about like consistency to their approach to the game. I've tended to like their approach to the game, just the consistency of success and production. But they have pieces. That's in what Class B is right now. Any given day, they can ruin someone's day.
So here's the way I look at it. I'm just gonna go and pull out my jump to conclusions mat and say we put Voorheesville and LaSalle above Corinth. So for the sake of let's just say Voorheesville's 7, LaSalle's 8. So then the argument becomes basically Corinth versus Waterville versus Chatham. Waterville has split the season series with Chatham home and home. So let's just use Waterville for this example. So Waterville, they play in the Patroon. Their strongest non-league games were a loss to open the year at Northville, a loss at Tamarack, a loss at Chalmont. This is all in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yep.
A loss at Dwaynesburg by 4 right before Christmas. And that's really... And then they have Cobleskill this Thursday. Meanwhile, you look at Corinth, their non-league games include a win at Galway to open the year, at Hudson Falls, a loss at Glens Falls, a loss at Northville as well, a loss at SGF by just 5. What else here? And then the 2 games at ACC about a month ago, the win over Ausable Valley, and then the loss against Mariah, and then that loss on Big Red Day that you mentioned. Oh, and a loss at Stillwater. So, to me, I'm going to assume they put Corinth around the 9 there, which now brings me to the question I want to bring up. LaSalle Corinth, let's assume that's your 8-9 in the Bs. How do we break that down? Because while yes, Corinth has Whitney Cameron, there's other pieces there too that you can't ignore. And then LaSalle, it's kind of the same thing. Yes, they have Kate Galuli, but you also have Macy Laporta and 1 or 2 other pieces to worry about there. So, I mean, it sounds like a pretty even matchup, and it might just come down to the fact they play that in LaSalle's gym from the looks of it.
So I like, if we're specifically going to talk about those 2, I like LaSalle in that matchup. I think they play the game a little bit faster. Your roster makeup can be similar because you kind of have a star and players kind of how you kind of fit around that star. Kate is a little bit more of like a scoring star than Whit, who everything runs through her, but generally she's scoring more in the teens, where Kate's scoring more in the 20s. I think that LaSalle just, they're a little bit more physical. They play a little bit faster. But also the thing with those 2 and everybody, like literally everybody in Class B, with the exception of Kisaki if they're playing a team with bad guards. Nobody scores it all that much against each other. Like, nobody is that consistent and that effective as like a scoring team. Like, if you take Kisaki, Catskill, like when they're playing bad teams, sure, but when it's Kisaki and Catskill, Catskill and Mechanicville and Tamarack and Cobleskill and Corinth and Voorheesville, LaSalle and Greenville, and you take any of those two teams and you put them up against each other, they don't score that much against each other. Like Catskill was maybe the only singular exception against Kisaki where we've talked about this numerous times at this point, where Salerno got lost in the scouting report and ended up with 30 in a 60 to whatever game, 61 to 48, 59 to 46, something like that. But besides that, just even look at any other example of two of these teams playing against each other this year. Mechanicville and Tamarack have played against each other twice. Mechanicville won by one both times. And I think the first time around was like 50 to 49, and that's like an NBA score compared to when they just played last week. The Voorheesville and LaSalle played each other at the beginning of the year. Score was 32-26. Greenville and Catskill just played each other last week, and Greenville won by 4 in a game in the 40s. So nobody really, when you take these teams and you put them against each other, and I could see that being relatively consistent among any of them, nobody scores that much. So when you have and this is one of, just outside of the fact of them all being relatively close together, just from a talent and athleticism standpoint, when you take teams that don't naturally score the ball at a high clip, like playoff scoring is not transition. Playoff scoring is being able to score in the half court. And playoff defense is being able to defend in the half court. Because at some point you're going to be playing teams that you just can't turn the ball. You can't have them turn the ball over constantly, and you have to be disciplined and get stops in the half court. So playoff basketball is won and lost in the half court, period. I said what I said. If you're not an overly effective half court offensive team, it greatly limits your margin for error. So that's why I've kind of been like, hey, throw all these teams in a pot and we'll see what happens. Because I don't think any of these teams has a high level of margin for error. Like that's in that specific, going back to if say LaSalle and Corinth were to play against each other, I like LaSalle in that matchup with basketball being a game of matchups, but neither team has great margin for error. If you take any of them, you just take any of those two teams, put them out and say play against each other, the margin for error for neither side is particularly great, just because you're probably looking at lower scoring games, and you're probably throughout the playoffs. I would not be surprised at all if you're looking at more lower scoring games, maybe not in the 30s like Mechanicville Tamarack was last week, but the classic first to 50. So when you have a bunch of first to 50 games, a few possessions make a world of difference. Somebody banking a 3 late in the shot clock makes a lot more difference than it does when it's 68 to 61. So that's the conundrum of Class B. And that's also the excitement of Class B coming down the road.
I mean, when you got Greenville going out and giving Catskill their first league loss of the year, and then they got Mechanicville. And you said this to me when you saw the result last week. Just Mechanicville furthering the mess that is the Wasserman with their 1-point win over Tamarack, which, if you ask Coach Bedoin, he'd tell you we should have won both games against Mechanicville this year, and he makes a valid point if you break down both games honestly. And then Tamarack turns around and they have Kayla go off for a career-high 31 and a win over Hoosick Falls the other day. Just Class B, man. Class B gonna Class B. That's the best way I can put it at this point for the year. So,
And you want me to complicate things?
go ahead.
What'd you say? What'd you say about Mechanicville Tamarack just now? Of they
There could be an argument made
or
that Tamarack should have won both those games.
before that of what was the word that you used? Further, like
Making a mess of the Wasserman.
yeah, they further made a mess of the Wazarin by making less of a mess of the Wazarin. It made it more clear in the league standings by them winning.
But they made it more of a mess as far as a sectional seeding standpoint.
And they made it less of a mess from Wazarin seeding standpoint because they're now clearly going to be seated above Tamarack. They got both wins. But
where though?
But where they made a mess was it appeared as though those two teams were trending in a certain sort of direction. And now, because Mechanicville came back and got that 1-point win earlier in the year, the way things look for Mechanicville lately, it looked like Tamarack probably a reasonably good position to split that season series. We thought they were going to zig, they zagged. Or it looked like they might zig and they zagged. So it really confused it less from an actual numbers standpoint for seeding. But it confused it a little bit more as far as it looked like things were going to go in a certain direction, then they didn't. Now what do we think?
Now we're at a place where more than likely your quarters look like Catskill, Tamarack up top, and then Coxsackie, Mechanicville on bottom.
Again, where do you throw Colonial in there? Because I know that Colonial records aren't matching what the Wazarin and the Patroon records are, but the Patroon and Wazarin ain't got to deal with Academy and Catholic High.
So you feel Voorheesville could jump as high as 4 potentially?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. They've. I would have felt that a little bit more if they beat Troy last week.
Yeah, and I could definitely see them getting obviously in my mind they jump over Corinth and from the Adirondack, Greenville from Patroon, and they jump over Cobleskill from the WAC.
Mm-hmm.
I'll definitely give that to Voorheesville.
If and this is also the other thing, and I know that this is kind of this is imperfect, unofficial, whatever. If we were to seed these teams off of eye test, nobody can tell me that they're not a top 4 team. Nobody. I'm not even going. I'm like, if somebody tells me that they are not a top 4 team in Class B, that is a conversation non-starter to me. I will look at you and I will say, have a good day, and I will walk away because there is nothing that we can get out of this. If we are just looking off of eye test, there is no way they're not a top 4 team. Numbers, seeding can be a little different, and that's where you throw in the variables of how much strength of schedule matters, how much, because again, like Fonda years ago, I continue to bring this up. I apologize for bringing up the past. Fonda, and I think this was the year maybe that they were it was one of their double-digit years. I don't remember if they were like a 13, a 12, or an 11 or something like that. But their entire stretch of the season, if you were to take, they played 20 games. If you were to take 19 of their games and throw them in the league, the seeding meeting, and take one particular one of those games out, they're probably like a 5 or a 6. But that particular year, they lost to a Cobleskill team they had absolutely no business losing to, that was also a Class B, that was a non-league at that point. Cobleskill is now in the WAC. At that point, they were the Colonial. But because Cobleskill beat Fonda, and it was a game that they had, with all due respect to that Cobleskill team, they had no business winning that game. But because they did, because Fonda laid an egg on that day, Cobleskill was going to be above Fonda in the seeding because of the head-to-head. And Cobleskill didn't have any business being higher than like a 9 or a 10, which is what they were. They were kind of seeded appropriately. But because of that one day, Fonda's seed was probably like 7 lower than it eye test should have been. So that sort of stuff is also worth keeping in mind. I know that I know that Ichabod is an A, but like, does that loss to Ichabod want to go? Granted, Voorheesville got their lick back over the weekend and split that season series. But does something like that come into play? I don't know. Let's say Voorheesville lays an egg tomorrow and they lose to Ravenna.
Mm-hmm.
Does that come into play? I don't know, but there's certain imperfections like that. And again, it comes into play far more in Class B than anywhere else, because Class B is the most vast range of geographic area and league representation.
Before I bring up one more factor for the Bs that's interesting, to get back to a point you made earlier, by the way, I think when you were mentioning Cambridge, I think you're referring to 2022 when they were the 8th seed and lost to Dwaynesburg in the quarters. Is that maybe what you were thinking of?
Yeah, they were the 8th, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they maybe beat Mayfield in the first round.
Right. They beat Mayfield by 11 and then lost by over 30 to Dwaynesburg in the quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the one point I want to mention, I'm asking you, I'm going to bring it up in a question form. What do Coxsackie, Catskill, Tamarack, Corinth, and Voorheesville have in common? Oh, as well as Greenville versus Tamarack and versus Mechanicville and Cobleskill.
That was every letter of the alphabet. I have no idea.
Coxsackie, Catskill, Tamarack, Greenville, Corinth have all played on 94-foot courts this year. Mechanicville and Cobleskill have not. Now, obviously, it doesn't come into play until you get to Hudson Valley for the semis. But there's no guarantee those are the 4 teams you're going to get in the semis. So I feel like in the end, no matter how it plays out, I think we're at a point where whatever combination of 4 comes out of B, barring any of them matching up against each other in the semis, you have to look at those 4 teams first in those matchups for the semis. Just because you have the experience of having played 94 feet, so now you know how to approach with and change potentially your usual game plan of playing on 94 feet versus 84 feet.
Yeah, I mean, but I also, and this is the weird thing, I think that Mechanicville is built to play on 94. Whether they've done it or not, I think that that's a team that's built for a bigger court. But Yeah, so it is kind of interesting. But yeah, there's the late season. There's the conditioning aspect to that.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Class A. Yeah, I mean it was Houyhnhnms. They were victorious Tuesday night in their senior night against Cahoes, where the first quarter and a half, I'll say, because I was there live for that. That was the surprise I was referencing last week. I surprised the senior class in doing their senior night. But if you look at that first quarter and a half, um, uh, a little nip and tuck, but then Houyhnhnms was able to pull away towards the end of that second quarter, and then maintained a nice deficit throughout the remainder of the game throughout the second half. Meanwhile, uh, that same night, Academy went to Chalmont and just handled business. Scotia ended up getting a good win at South Glens Falls on Thursday, and then the first of two Section 2 games that we'll mention that you checked out last week. Academy Houyhnhnms, a game where, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, in a way, it almost happened again to Academy in a way, where um, it was just different this time because instead of it being like a close one possession game and them, for lack of a better phrase, throwing it away like they did at Shaker against Columbia. There was one other game I think we referenced before that was kind of like that. The game before Aquinas, I think it was, we were talking about at one point, where I think they had a chance to hit a 3 to tie in the last minute against Aquinas, back during the Christmas break. So this time Academy had a pretty decent lead. And you can tell me if I'm wrong in the way I'm recounting this, they had a pretty decent lead. Then Houyhnhnms just started shooting lights out basically in the fourth quarter and cut that deficit down to, what was it? I think it was like 5 or 6 at one point you were mentioning.
As close as 4.
Okay, 4. But Academy was able to hold on and get the win at Houyhnhnms. Very nice league win for Academy. And in my opinion, a league win I think they needed. Like, no offense, but to me, it's one thing to beat Lansingburg. It's one thing to beat Chalmont, where you can just out-athlete Chalmont. No offense to Chalmont, but
Well, yeah, it's
if you
true.
compare Academy's athletes to Chalmont's athletes, it advantage Academy, really. But to go out there and take care of a team like Houyhnhnms that had been seemed to be finding a level of consistency there, going into that game. A good win for Academy to get before they go into their second match of the year against Catholic Central this week.
Yeah, I enjoyed that game Friday. Academy jumped out to a pretty sizable lead early. I think they led by as much as 18 later in the second quarter, and they led by 16 at the half. They got that lead not because Houyhnhnms played poorly. They got it because they played really well. And then in the second half, Houyhnhnms responds. They make their gradual pushback. They get it all the way to 4. And they got that close, not because Academy played poorly, but because they played really well. And then Academy closed that. I think Houyhnhnms got it to 4. I think on the ensuing possession, Alex Leonard hits a big 3, make it a 3-possession game under 2 minutes left. And Houyhnhnms never made like a substantial sort of push from there. I believe was the chronological order of things. But everything nobody played perfect, but everything that happened in that game to me wasn't because of the other side playing poorly and shooting themselves in the foot or trying to give the game away or whatever. It was because whoever was winning that portion of the game was playing really well, which that's good to see. That was an enjoyable high school game. and this wasn't just because the timing of when I arrived, because there's a lot of times that I've walked into Holy Names 10 minutes before the game starts. Uh, I've been to that gym a lot over the years. I don't think I don't think it was the most packed I've ever seen that gym. Like I've been there a couple times where they've had really large crowds, or as far as what that gym can fit large crowds. But I've never had to park that far away from the door. Where I pulled up and that was my first thought was, oh Jesus, okay, this is gonna be a juiced house because I had to park about as far away as possible. So that there was a lot of different factors that I enjoyed about that game. Academy played, and I'm not not trying to use hyperbole or not trying to overhype anything or whatever. I thought Academy played a state championship level first half. Uh, Everything. And that was to me, that was a state championship level first half. That was effectiveness in creating the sort of style of game that they wanted. Um, Taking advantage of every opportunity they had to run and converting at a high clip, having a defensive game plan and executing a defensive game plan. Alex Leonard came out and had who at they're a team that this year and in years past, or the previous couple of years, they've had a diverse array of weapons. But I think we look at Alex Leonard as, when push comes to shove, their primary scorer, or who we think of as their primary scorer. And if they need a bucket, it's probably, she's going to be involved in that action. She had a really good first half. So you had that. You had all the other weapons kind of firing. Again, they scored a lot in transition. They looked decent in the half court. Like there was a rhythm to everything they were doing. Just everything. You could check whatever box. Second half, the big thing, like Academy had a clear defensive game plan. The reality is they were just, I don't want to say that they weren't guarding a particular player for Holy Names, but there was somebody that they were just they were guarding like just enough. You're not going to get an open layup, but if you're away from the play, if you're on the weak side, the person that was guarding that player just left her and shaded Maggie Vollmer. So they were trying to double Maggie whenever the ball was on her side of the court. Primary defender playing behind, help defender fronts. And because of that, Maggie ended up scoring 13 total, but they were never really able to get her involved. And if that's what the game plan is, and if they're able to execute that in the game, if they're able to execute that defensively, Holy Names can't get her involved doing it their traditional ways of trying to make, just like ball to the wing, post entry pass. The only other ways that you would be able to get her involved, catch and finish off of dribble drive. And their guards weren't really getting paint touches. They weren't necessarily trying that, weren't going out of their way to get paint touches, but that sort of game plan, if you want to get Maggie involved, it's got to be, you're not really going to be able to get that post entry pass there. And even if you do, she's doubled on the catch. So that would have, to get her involved would have had to be more like dribble penetration, dribble drive, get a paint touch, suck in the defense, dump down. So because they weren't able to get Maggie involved the way that they would like, really what they needed is some of their other kids to just what Academy was giving up was kick out jumpers. Rise to the occasion. Take the kick out three, shoot it with confidence, and try to make the scoreboard move in threes. First half game was a little bit too fast for them, I thought, and they weren't taking those jumpers with confidence. As the game progressed in the second half, they started to take advantage of those looks and started to hit at a higher clip, particularly Morgan Brewer and Julia Viglucci late. Morgan was solid throughout. She just didn't score it early, and then she hit a jumper or two in the first half. Picked it up more in the second half. Hit a couple big ones. I think she hit the one that cut it to 4 as well. And then Viglucci, young guard, sophomore, comes off the bench, has been kind of a scoring punch off the bench for them throughout the year. Struggled with Academy's pace and ball pressure for a while in that game. And then fourth quarter came alive with 3 threes to help kind of lead that little charge back. But that's a long-winded way of saying it was a good win for Academy. I feel like they needed that in the sense of within the Colonial, you just outside of Catholic Central, they haven't really got 32-minute games where they needed to execute in the fourth quarter. And they needed to make plays in the fourth quarter. Even the first time against Holy Names, their third quarter was so big that the fourth quarter was, it was a foregone conclusion. Fourth quarter in this game, that they needed to execute and they needed to get stops, which they didn't do that much of. Holy Names still had like 25 in the fourth, but so they either needed to do that or they needed to fight fire with fire and keep scoring, which they did. But yeah, long-winded way of saying good win for Academy, good environment for them, good for Holy Names too. I think that was outside of the fact that you're competitive and you want to win every game. That was a game that I walked away from thinking, win or lose, nobody was really upset. Like Academy felt like that was a good game and a good win for us, and Holy Names was like, okay, I think we can do this. Gave them more confidence going into a potential round 3 than maybe that round 1 did.
I'll come back to the top in a second, but I'm thinking, I want to think of the gradually advancing big picture here for a second. I want to start in sectionals real quick because the way Class A lays out, there's 14 teams. Let's assume for the sake of conversation, all 14 play in sectionals. I want to look at 2 potential items of business for maybe tricky spots in the lower draw. Let's assume, first off, RCS or Cohoes wins the 11-14 first round match and goes on to play Scotia Glenville, who I'm going to assume as of right now gets the 6. And I'm just asking this based on the level of competition those 2 teams have played, with Scotia having played in the foothills and RCS or Cohoes, either of those 2 having played in the Colonial. Do you feel RCS or Cohoes are at a level to beat Scotia in a first round or a quarterfinal?
I mean, if that's what the matchup was, I just feel like it would be competitive. I don't really know who, that just kind of feels like a competitive-ish sort of matchup. I think you're going to see that a good amount if you're talking the number, any number 6 or below, I think that we're probably going to be seeing
I mean,
that, amongst each other. The Scotia, the Ichabod, the Ravenna, the Cohoes, um, like a Hudson Falls, even.
here's the other end of it too. Because it's 14 teams, I'm gonna go and they're not doing a preliminary round. They're only doing a first round in Class A, which means the bracket would be formatted technically for 16. Because it's 14 teams, that would mean your 1 and 2 seeds are going to get a bye that round.
Mhm.
No disrespect to Broad Open Perth, but we've talked about body of work and strength of schedule on here before. Are we looking at a scenario where you have Academy 1 and Holy Names 2 being the 2 buys and BP kind of getting crapped on and put at the 3?
I think that's the biggest question of seeding. Um, who lands at 2 and who lands at 3? To me, that's I hate to put it this way. To me, that's the only thing that I'm looking at with what the actual seeding of things. It's not the only thing that I care about in Class A sectionals, but as far as how the seeds fall,
As far as the intrigue of the seedings is
that's
concerned.
the only thing that I'm looking at. Because
Now,
I anticipate that um I anticipate that either whether Shalmon is the 4 and Glens Falls is the 5 or vice versa. Um I think that's how it's going to fall. Unless there's because I know that game that don't really pay that much attention to until it's like, oh shoot, maybe I should have paid attention to it. Um, I know Scotia just beat Glens Falls last week.
correct.
That creates a season split between those two. So it's just a matter of it's going to be a matter of what the league standings are between Glens Falls and Scotia.
And
As
it's not
to
like
who,
Shalmon's firing on all cylinders right now either, because I mean, I know. All right, let me rewind. They went through a tough schedule stretch recently. They lost 3 in a row, but the 3 in a row were Catholic Central Academy and stepping up to play at Boston Spa, a double A, literally the night after losing to Academy. So that kind of set them up in a little bit of a lose-lose scenario where A, you're going on the road, B, it's Boston Spa senior night, and C, you just lost to Academy the night before. So it was just a weird triple threat there for Shalmont, but they were able to bounce back okay with a win against RCS back on Friday. Now they have at Ichabod tomorrow, at Voorheesville Friday, where I mean, if you can get the season sweep, now I'm not calling for it, but if you do get a season sweep again with the game at Voorheesville Friday, I feel like that might be enough to punch you out the 4 seed there.
to me, if it's me seeding, which it's clearly not me seeding, but if it was me, I would have Shalmon at the 4. Regardless of how all this stuff, the last whatever plays out. I just took a quick look at Foothill standings. Yes, there's a Glens Falls Scotia season split. Their league standings right now are currently close. To me, Glens Falls is more in position to end up the higher of the two as far as league standings, which would
Mm.
to me kind of lesser complicate things, which would put maybe Glens Falls at the 5. Whether regardless of who lands at the 4 and who lands at the 5, to me is kind of irrelevant because they're not getting home court either. Regardless of who's the 4 and who's the 5, they're going to play that on Albany Academy's court. or whoever's the 1 seed.
Right.
It's just
And
a matter of does Glens Falls wear white or red, and does Chalmont wear white or their aways aren't even green; they're gray. The white or
oh, right.
gray with green trim. But yeah, so I think we're probably going to get into that Chalmont Boston Spa game in a minute. So I'll try to I'll avoid it right this second. But yeah, I mean the most important or the number one thing I'm looking at with the seeding is who gets a 2, who gets a 3. I think my gut says right now Broad Albin ends up as the 2,
Okay.
but it. But I think that there's a good conversation and a good discussion to be had in that room about that.
Like honestly, it could just come down to, and I don't know if this is how it plays out usually, but it really could just come down to who comes out the winner of a discussion involving the league representatives in that room that day between Eric Doomer for the Foothills and Steve Giglio for the Colonial.
That's
That's literally what it
always
could come down to.
always fun.
And by the way, because you mentioned the Scotia Glens Falls layout, I mean the schedule plays out better for Glens Falls the rest of the way because Scotia has technically, when you really think about it, a second home game against Amsterdam tonight because the original game was moved. The original first game was moved from Amsterdam to their gym because of, I think it was like a pipes, like frozen pipes. I think was this. Oh no, that was the Sal
Or
water
water
main.
main break.
That's what it was. It was a water main break in Amsterdam, so they had to, that affected the school, so they moved it from. So really, it's going to be a second home game for Scotia against Amsterdam. The first one there, they had lost by 11, by the way, to Amsterdam, and then Scotia has to go to Broad and Perth on Thursday. Meanwhile, Glens Falls, they have 3 games still at Schuylerville, home against Queensbury, then at SGF. So if I were to project, you probably give Glens Falls 2 out of 3. And obviously, tonight against Amsterdam is the coin flip out of the 2 Scotia is left.
Mm-hmm.
But if you lose that, you're probably not going to win at BP, especially because I think that's going to be their senior night, which adds to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you mentioned, Glens Falls, yeah, it looks like the 3 in the Foothills.
Yeah, and they flipped those, by the way. Tonight's they just flipped the host site. So the first one that was
they're
supposed
going to
to
put
be
it in
at
Amsterdam tonight?
Yeah, so they're playing that in Amsterdam tonight.
Okay, watch. In my actual notes, I did that. No, I still put it at Scotia. All right, so that's on me for not verifying. Okay. Good job, Ryan. All right. So now let me fast forward here. Do you have your handwritten updated version of your Upstate 20 for this week yet?
Nope.
Do you have last week's in front of you?
I can pull it up very easily. Yes, I can.
Okay. Because I'm very interested in this. I want to, because I have a few questions. Because I'm really, really going forward projecting on this real quick.
Yep.
Your Section 2 teams. Who's 1? Who's 2? Who's 3?
As far as how I have them ranked along the way.
Correct.
I have Academy as of last week's. I still have, and this goes to a broader discussion about Class A statewide that we won't get into unless we want this to be 4 hours long. But I have Academy as the top Section 2 team. I also have them at number 1 in my Upstate 20, and that will not change going into my next one. Next in line, I had Broad Albin, who I had at number 6.
Okay.
Don't think there's going to be much of a change there. Maybe a little tweak up or down. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Numbers are hard. And then third, I had Holy Names at 16. They're probably going to bump up, I would assume. I have not touched this yet, and I'm so far behind, it might not be until Tuesday morning, afternoon when I get to it. But just looking at this, I'm going to guess that Holy Names probably bumps up to 13, 14.
Okay.
Even
All right.
with the loss, the eye test, they look good. They've improved. They ran with Academy. And then there was a couple teams above them. They're actually both Section 1 teams. Number 13 was Ardsley. They took a pretty tough loss on Friday. And then number 14, Pelham. I'm just going to have to drop a little bit more because, unfortunately, their best player went down with an ACL. So,
Okay. So just remind me again, what teams have you not been including in your upstate 20 as far as like
A's.
I'm assuming you don't have independents involved, correct?
Oh, okay. Um, every
Every section in
every school north of New York City
right.
outside of Preps.
So no independents. Any P sals in there?
No, just draw the line at New York City.
All right.
So,
So no P sals, no CHS, no AIS. Okay.
well, I am doing CHS north of the city. So
All right. So where's St. Dominic's?
Buffalo splits publics and privates.
All right. So where's St.
So,
Dominic's? Is that the city?
uh, or Long Island. I don't have it's not so basically with my CHSAA schools, it's the Monsignor Martin schools out in Western New York. So Cardinal O'Hara, St. Mary's Lancaster, Nichols, Sacred Heart, Narden, so on and so forth. And the only other one outside of that is Kennedy Catholic.
Okay. St. Dominic's. St. Dominic's. Oyster Bay. Yeah, that's Long Island. Okay. All right. So just for comparison's sake, I'm going to run through the schools on last week's New York State Sports Writers rankings. I want to compare it to you.
Mm-hmm.
I will make sure I take out because number one on their rankings is an AIS school, so I'm taking that out.
Okay.
So I'm going to run through the top. Where'd you say it'd be? P7?
I had him at 6.
Okay. I'll run through the top 6 they have that would match up to the way you rank. And we'll just kind of, because I'm trying to prove a point here real quick. Academy would be 1. Our Lady of Mercy out of Section 5. They have Broad Albin what would be 3rd compared to your rankings. Then Johnson City, East Ridge, Utica, Notre Dame.
Okay.
First of all, are all 6 of those schools in your top 6 right now? As of last week.
What'd you say it was? It was Academy.
Academy,
It
Our
was
Lady of
Mercy.
Mercy, BP,
BP.
Johnson City.
They are not all in my top 6. 3, 4 of them are
I'm going to assume Johnson City and East Ridge are not.
correct. The lowest that I have out of any of those 6 was at number 11.
Okay. All right, so I'll just name a couple more.
That's not the worst.
Okay, I'll name a couple more just to get your feel for Class A and what they have.
Yeah.
Indian River would be next.
I'm sorry, Coach Whitley. I don't have Indian River on my 20.
Okay.
I've seen. I don't have them on my 20.
Malone Franklin.
They're pretty good. I have them at 12. I had them a little bit higher early in the year. They took a loss to Peru over the holiday break that made me kind of drop them a bit, but they are a good team. They're coming down here next week to play at Coxsackie. Unfortunately, it's the same day as the WAC Cup championships, and it's at 4:00. But
and just because you mentioned them, again, taking out the schools that don't qualify into your rankings, Holy Names would be 11, Peru would be 13.
Okay.
Anyways, the reason for this exercise is because I'm looking out and projecting into how the state bracket's going to play out. The winners of 3 and 10 will face off in a sub-regional, and then the winners of 2 and 7. 7, the highest team that I'm looking at from the state sports writers would be Peru. Does that sound right for you?
Peru and Beekmantown will be your likely Section 7 championship game that I will also likely be up in Plattsburgh for, because they are running their fun little side note. I will go on a tangent. Section 7 is running their championships a week earlier than most because they're going to take a page out of Section 10's book. Section 10 does something that no other section in the state does. They have an overall championship. So they have 4 classes, A, B, C, D. They've got no double A's, no triple A's, and it's been like they've had A, B, C, D forever.
Right.
They've had 2 A's, Messina and Malone. It's kind of been that way forever, and then just your group of B's, C's, and D's. Section 10 has an overall championship after their section championship games, where it's your A champ against your D champ and your B and your C. They play semifinal, final, and they play to an overall champ just for like area bragging rights
Basically,
before regionals. Section 7 is kind of sort of taking a page out of that book, and they're going to do, I forget exactly what he's calling it, but like a conference of champions sort of thing, like a champions contest.
like a TOC, Tournament of Champions, essentially.
Yes. So instead of it being a bracket, they're just going to do A plays B, C plays D as a quote large school and small school Section 7 bragging rights sort of thing. So they're doing that during sectional final week for everybody else. So they're getting their sectional finals out of the way. I think A, B, and C play on February 28th and D plays on March 1st. So anyways, 7, Peru and Beekmantown, likely, unless Plattsburgh has something to say about it, although Peru and Beekmantown are a step ahead. That will be your Section 7 championship game. I think Peru is a little bit better of a team, but there is a big sister, little sister complex to that matchup where Beekmantown has kind of been the ruler on the block for the last couple of years against the young bucks of Peru. And Peru's done, they've done a lot of good, but hadn't been able to get over the hump of Beekmantown. And whenever they play each other, it's just like, big sister, son's little sister. Things changed last week. Peru took down Beekmantown. Like, that's a really big win for those kids from a morale perspective. So they played each other twice. Beekmantown beat the snot out of Peru at Peru a few weeks ago. And then Peru just beat Beekmantown at Beekmantown. So round 3 is going to be fun. I think Peru's slightly better of the two teams, but that's a toss-up between those two as far as who makes it out.
So here's the ultimate question I wanted to get to.
Mm-hmm.
Because those two sub-regionals are together, is there anything to stop us from seeing a state championship final rematch in the regional final this year between Academy? Again, assuming long form projections.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything to prevent us from seeing Utica Notre Dame versus Academy again this year?
You're in a good place to see it. It's not 100% certainty, but if we were to put Vegas lines down as far as what the regional final matchup would be between these 4 sections, I think Academy against Notre Dame would be minus something.
Okay.
200, 300, whatever. Can Academy got in Section 2? I mean, stuff happens, right? Are they the favorite? Definitely.
Right. But I mean, like you said earlier, though, because Holy Names has that. Okay, it can happen. We just gotta make sure we play 32 minutes, and then I know it sounds like we're completely writing off BP, but BP's got a lot of length and a lot of height and length. So I mean, again, this is just me shaking the crystal ball and saying what could potentially happen. That's all.
Yep, and 3 kind of has a somewhat similar complex, although I think it's a little bit closer, maybe. Um, at least with like Jamesville DeWitt might be a closer second, maybe, to Notre Dame.
Hmm.
Um, I think the 4 that you're talking about out in 3, or Notre Dame to me is the favorite. And then you have CVA, Central Valley Academy, the artists formerly known as Ilian and Mohawk, um, Jamesville DeWitt, and Indian River.
Right.
I think whatever Indian River, I think Indian River is the 4 out of those 4 teams. Um, CVA's interesting. They're kind of an odd sort of team, but they muck it up. Like they kind of make life difficult for Notre Dame. Like they haven't been able to get over the hump, and I don't think it's ever felt like they were close to being able to. But they've also played them tough to like 5-7 point games. So there's that. JD's come along as the year has gone on. Randy Wright's got that job now. He's done a nice job with them.
Hmm.
And they've got a couple pieces. They've got a good guard that's going to University of Rochester next year, Ava Sandroni. So like there's a chance there. Um, Malone Notre Dame sub-regional leading into that regional final is interesting because you just have to score. You have to be able to score to beat Notre Dame. They're going to, outside of a real, especially the way that they've been playing the last few weeks, where they've kind of figured it out and hit that next gear in the half court offensively. Young point guard Lily Johnson has really come into her own. Ella Trinkus is hitting shots on a more consistent basis. Erin Trinkus just had, she's had some huge games along the way. You have to be able to score to beat Notre Dame. You can't beat them in like an under 50, thug it out grind fest. Malone scores. Malone gets a lot. They've got a high level guard of their own. They've got a couple, or they've got a high level guard. They've got like a stretch 4 that can really shoot it, and they got a physical 5 that can score around the rim. They get a lot of games in the 60s and 70s. So that they at least have. You have to be able to score to beat Notre Dame. They can score. So that sub regional will be interesting. I'm more interested in the 310 sub regional than I am the 2-7. But betting odds would say, and I was just talking about this with, I'll give a shout out to one of my absolute favorites, John Rathbun, the John without the H,
Hmm.
the once sports editor of the Little Falls Evening Times when I was in high school, that then turned into the sports editor of the Evening Times and the Evening Times and the Herkimer Morning Telegram, that
Yep.
then turned into the Times Telegram, that then got bought out by the same company that the the Gannett, the Observer Dispatch in Utica. You got to love the newspaper into the print media industry, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
He's now the grand poobah of the Mohawk Valley athletic scene. Uh, I was out there yesterday, and we were talking for a while after the game that we both attended, and he asked me about regional state thoughts and if I thought that there were any teams from his area that he should probably be looking at as far as like state level run. And I made it a point to bring up, I think we're in decent shape to see a Class B state final rematch in a Class A regional final with those two.
John Rathman and I'll throw Nate Lull in there. Great friends of the program for us.
Tremendous. John and Nate, 2 of my absolute favorites. They're the best.
And by the way, last forward projection to let you know, whoever would win that regional final, they played the winner of the 8-11 regional final. which is both downstate, I believe. So
It's Long Island. It's not.
yeah.
8 is Nassau County. 11 is Suffolk County.
So we're talking schools like Limbrook, Wantagh, Floral Park, Shoreham, Wadding River, Kings Park. Kings Park, I believe, was not too long ago, like a year or two ago. They were in the states.
Last year. Last year.
That's
They not trying to put the cart before the horse or anything, but Long Island public school basketball. Nah.
okay. All right. All right. Good to know, I guess. All right. Let's get back on track here. Let's get to Double A here. Let's just get into the game we backdoor reference because we brought up Shalmont a little bit there. The other Section 2 game you were at this week was senior night for Boston Spa on Wednesday. When they did defeat Shalmont, I believe it was like a 6 or 7 point game somewhere in that ballpark. What were the takeaways you had from that game between B Spa and Shalmont?
I'll give you the word that I gave literally everybody that I talked to after that game. Strange.
Okay.
That was a strange game, man. You're Jekyll meet Hyde, right? And like out of Mr. Hyde came Dr. Jekyll for Shalmont. They're the most fire and ice, whatever you want to call it, sort of team in Section 2. And there's like 2 or 3 teams that I can think of in my entire coverage region that are just on a different level of like which one of them are we going to see on a night-to-night basis. They're absolutely one of them. They've had their fire nights, they've had their ice nights, and occasionally they have both in the same game. Ask Niski about that a few weeks ago in the non-league like 5:00 start where Niski jumped out to a lead of the upper teens, maybe 17, 19, something. I think it was 19 maybe.
I
And
think it
then,
was like 33-14 at the half or something like that.
and then Shalmont makes a run, and it's a one possession game. Like Shalmont has a chance to tie it in the final seconds.
No.
Shalmont scored 8 points in the first half at Boston Spa. And I think that they would agree with me when I say this. It was every bit of what you would expect an 8-point first half to be. It was nasty. The reality is they live and die by the 3. They have to be hyper vigilant. Like, in order to be at their best, they have to be hyper vigilant as far as understanding, recognizing, and creating perimeter shot quality. And sometimes they do that and sometimes they don't. And when they don't, you see what you see in the first half. They gave up 25 points. Whatever. Like, a lot of times you give up 25 points in a first half, and in today's day and age in high school basketball, like, cool. That's fine. They scored 8. And and those 8 points were a 3 on the first possession of the game, like 18 seconds into the game, and then nothing for the rest of the first quarter. And then another 3 and another bucket within the first just under 2 minutes of the second quarter. And then another nothing for the last 6 minutes of the half. Just poor shot quality. I really just, I'm not trying to, like, I get that we're talking about high school basketball, amateur athletics, and I'm not trying to be overly harsh, but it was just poor shot quality. More so than, just bad luck, halfway down and out. It was just like out of rhythm, low percentage threes, where there was no flow to the offense. There was no paint touch, kick out, being able to step into a shot. It was none of that. It was just rough. And then second half, wow, things change. They come out of the locker room and it's the same players with a different team. And they start to create and it's nothing, with all due respect to Boston Spa. To me, none of this has anything to do with Boston Spa. None of this has anything to do with what Boston Spa was doing to make life difficult for Chalmont or to make life easier for Chalmont. None of that. It was just Chalmont kind of chucking. Lower shot quality in the first half, better shot quality in the second half. Made more of an effort to, again, the three ball is a primary identity of them offensively. It's not like you're going into the locker room saying stop shooting threes, because if you say stop shooting threes, they're not going to score that much. So like that is a primary part of their identity. But they got better shots coming out of the locker room. They made more of an effort to space the floor, let the ball see both sides of the court, get paint touches, use a paint touch to create, kick, and allow people to step into shots. I thought Ariana Brandon was a primary source of that, just with her ability to, like, to me, she was the first one that kind of took it upon herself to say, I'm going to get to the rim, or I'm going to get in the paint, and whatever happens, happens. And when they started getting in the paint, good things happened. And Gianna Cirilla hit a few shots. Ari hit a few shots. Natalia Devine, they're like starting four. She hit a couple perimeter jumpers. And they just, in the third quarter, it honestly, at the end of the third quarter, I didn't feel like, it wasn't like, oh, Chalmont's got a chance to win this game. But within the third quarter, just they didn't chop much off the scoreboard after falling behind 25-8 at half. But it was the way the game was being played was completely different. And they had chopped just enough off the scoreboard that I felt at the end of the third quarter like, all right, don't turn off the TV. Like, we're just close enough for something to happen here. And sure enough, it starts to show more on the scoreboard. I felt like if there's one thing that I could say on the end of, with Boston Spa, I think that there was a stretch as Chalmont made their run that, and that could, I guess, to be expected, right? This momentum shifts and riding the wave of momentum, they looked a little shell-shocked. Kind of like, no way, this isn't happening. But yeah, Chalmont scores 8 in the first half. They're down 17, and then Ari hits a three off a kick-out three off of a turnover to tie it at 45 with just under a minute left. So 8 in the first half, 37 in the second half, right? But
wow.
The other thing that I would bring up about that game was it was Boston Spa's senior night. Senior nights can be anomaly games. Like, I put senior nights in the similar sort of boat, at not quite the same, but just I put them in the same boat as like a 1,000-point game, a milestone game, where they're anomalies. The feel is a little bit different. The emotion of the team that it impacts is a little bit different, and how they play the game tends to be a little different. Whether it's, trying to make sure that certain individuals, whoever it may be for, get touches, more things go through them, or, especially on a senior night, rotations can change a little bit. rotations didn't change all that much for Boston Spa because most of their seniors play. Like most of their seniors get or primary players that get minutes. Jessica Bowens, Mallory Sprisler, Callie Richards. They start 3 seniors and 2 juniors. And one of the juniors, Aubrey Kramer, who had a game high 19 points and was like the most consistent presence on the court throughout the game. Her minutes and her reps that remained unchanged. If there was one person whose role in that particular game changed compared to their norm, it was the other junior that sits in the starting lineup for Boston Spa, Carson Messina. So Carson went to more of a bench role. She got her minutes, but it wasn't, she was the one that took the dip in that particular game with it being senior night. Maybe playing more like half the game and didn't see the ball as much, didn't see as many reps, whatever. When she was in, I talk about approach a lot. I didn't feel like her approach to the game changed at all. Even if it meant she wasn't really seeing touches or getting reps or whatever, I didn't feel like her approach to the game changed. And then when they needed it, 8 points in the last 3 minutes of the game. She had a big 3 for him. She got a steal and a layup that really kind of set up Chalmont's last little surge. I think it maybe made it a 7-point game with a couple minutes left, where I felt like, she got that steal and layup, and I felt like, okay, that settled the storm. Boston Spa is going to be okay. And then it didn't settle the storm at all. But the ensuing possession after Ari hit the 3 to tie it up ended up baseline out of bounds. They tried to run some action for Aubrey Kramer. Ari sniffed it out. They couldn't get it over to her. Callie Richards had the ball up top, made the right read, hit Carson on the other deep wing corner, and Carson hits the 3 that eventually proves to be the game winner with about 30-ish seconds left, give or take. So that's worth a shout out. Kid, senior night for a non-senior. Her role and her minutes and all of that was probably the only one on the team that really changed. From somebody that usually plays more to playing a little bit less, and she kind of stayed in the fight and made big plays and big shots when they needed to close it out.
And Ball Spa is one of a team I want to use as a side-by-side comparison for something in a second. Boston Spa, that win came in between a pair of losses last week as they played 3 games. Only lost by 10 at Shenandoah the night before their senior night game, and then end up dropping one at Albany. Against Albany back on Friday. Meanwhile, the team I want to do a little side-by-side comparison with is Amsterdam, as they drop a tough one on their senior night against South Glens Falls on Monday, and then they were pesky, but still end up losing against Queensbury on Wednesday. So as things play out right now, Amsterdam and Boston Spa are basically side by side in the AA standings, so to speak. Where do we? Obviously, the big question becomes weighing the Suburban Council schedule Boston Spa played versus the Foothills schedule that Amsterdam played, but also you have to factor in Amsterdam playing more out of league, and I would personally say slightly stronger out of league competition compared to what Boston Spa played this year. Does it kind of even out at that point and still give a slight edge to Amsterdam? Or do you think just because it's Suburban Council, it's going to give an automatic bump up to B Spa in that situation? It's close. That's why I did this side by side, because
Here's
it's an interesting, pull and tug.
I would tend to lean towards Boston Spa. Although that game with Queensberry, like that Amsterdam Queensberry game, that did catch my eye. I know that they lost the game, but they won 3 quarters. I think it was the 30-point difference second quarter. That was, it was just a young team faltering later in the half, going into the locker room on the road, that kind of did them in. But that caught my attention. And again, young group in Amsterdam, and I think that Coach Doomler's got them playing better as the year goes on. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be an interesting team in that AA mix. Understand that if there's any quote common opponent, where if you have one that plays, like one team played them early in the season and one team played them late in the season, if there's one common opponent that doesn't really tell the story, it's Queensberry. Because what Queensberry was early in the season compared to what they are now is 2 completely different animals.
Correct.
Like a Shetland pony and a thoroughbred. But Boston Spa beat the snot out of Queensberry early in the year. So when you look at those, like when you go to the seeding meeting and you're trying to bring up that sort of a debate as far as who lands in this spot, who lands in that one, Boston Spa's got a 20+ point win over Queensberry, and Amsterdam's got losses against them. And I get that looking at it from beyond what the actual numbers are, this is a different Queensberry team than what Boston Spa played early in the year. And I think that gets interesting as far as seeding Boston. Like, we're talking about Boston Spa versus Amsterdam right now, right?
How about Queensberry and where they go?
But I think that gets interesting when you're talking about Boston Spa versus Queensberry. Are we penalizing a Queensberry team for not being that good in the beginning of December? Or are we looking past what that result was because of what has happened since? Like, they have not lost since. And I know that it's the Foothills, but they have not lost since they beat Broadalbin. I know Saratoga is very down, but they handled them with relative ease. They have Guilderland coming up next week, which, maybe that can give you another common opponent sort of guideline. But
I think the argument can be made, by the way, if Queensberry was Queensberry for game 2 of the season, there's no way in hell they should have lost that game at BP.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was a game where it turned out to be first to 35-1, where nobody seemed to want to score the basketball. If Queensberry was in the shape it's in now, back then, that's a Queensberry win by double digits. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, again, that's looking beyond the numbers. But so it really comes down to the conversation that's had, again, between, in this case, Coach Doomer, and I'm trying to remember who. I'm not sure if it's Mark or if it's somebody else Joe Murphy. The head coach for Shen, who's the Suburban Council rep that's going to be in the room. It's going to come down to, the interpretations of those two, because not only are you talking about, balancing Boston Spa in there, you're also talking about trying to balance Troy into that conversation for Colonial with Steve Giglio as the league rep. And you're also talking about balancing Averill Park somewhere in there as well. So really, once you get past Catholic Central and Columbia as your 1-2, whichever way you want to put them, 3 through 9, if you want to include Niskayuna and Bethlehem, 3 through 9, generally speaking, you could put those 7 schools in just about any order, and both of us could sit here the next day and be like, yeah, okay. Like, that's just how insanely weird and close things are when you're comparing and contrasting the numbers versus the strength of schedules.
Yeah, I mean, and Queensberry's maybe the one that kind of complicates things here when you're talking about the higher end, because again, if I am seeding, I have Catholic High, Columbia. This is no particular order, by the way, but I have Catholic High, I have Columbia, I have Averill Park, I have Bethlehem, I have Niskey, and I have Queensberry. And that is what I'm thinking about for my top 6. How you go about that now, some of it gets answered for you with head-to-heads and how they finish, in what order they finish in league standings, in particular the 4 teams that are in the Suburban Council.
Well, hold on. And this is not me trying to. All right, it's me questioning you a little bit. Troy's not even a consideration for a top 6.
No.
Not even with holy names, Catholic Central, Chalmont, Academy in your schedule.
Troy's double. We're talking double A, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Troy's double A.
Troy lost. No, they lost to Chalmont. They.
Let me
Well,
see.
they're just they're. It's a different. They've got a loss to LaSalle. Because Troy's
here are the losses. Here are the losses for Troy. Troy's losses are neutral site against Broad Open Perth, at Holy Names, home against Chalmont, at Catholic Central, at LaSalle by 2, a game which they could have very easily won.
Mm-hmm.
And then they've won 8 of their last 9, with their only loss being at Albany Academy on their senior night.
Yeah, they don't have Troy. This is not me throwing shade at Troy. They're a young team, 8th graders, 9th graders. They're going to, if things continue, they have the potential to be the face or a face in this area down the road. But I'm not judging what they look like. They have potential to be in 2027, in 2025. You know, just like when you look at their body of work compared, again, when you look at their body of work compared to the other AA team's body of work, it doesn't compare. And if you look at the eye test, I can't put them in that. I've watched them a couple times in person. Like I can't put them in that.
Okay.
In that boat. They're coming, right? They're on their way. A young player, like their roster, they're in the similar boat as Amsterdam, and that's a little bit more of the boat in which I would put them in AA, as far as the level. As far as I think of them more as in the boat with Boston Spa and Amsterdam, and they're in that boat with Amsterdam as far as how young they are. Like those are 2 teams in particular that they're like JV age teams. They happen to be playing varsity basketball, and they have kids clearly that are good enough to play and to be successful at varsity level. You know, varsity level basketball. Amaya Harris, Kiana Tiernan, Mia Natal over here. You know, like so on. When you look at those two teams in particular, but you know they've got the potential to be faces and main. You know, like your 1 seeds in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't put them in the same boat as the other AA's. I mean, just can't.
I do want to ask one more Troy-related question, and it's totally not sectional related right now.
Mm-hmm.
When you take the progress of Troy 2 years ago to last year, with which was the first year under Will Harris, if I remember correctly. So you take 2 years ago versus last year versus this year, the way the progression has gone. Is Burnt Hills essentially Troy 2.0, but a year behind in a way? or does losing
I'm trying to figure out how I want to put this.
you also have to factor in one thing though, and that is what was it, Tegan Keene?
But that's a huge factor. Like that's
Right.
that
You lost her to Husak.
that factor can't be understated.
Right.
But even if losing at this, looking at what those two rosters are now, not including Tegan, that but losing Tegan, massive. People around here don't realize how good she is and could be. Um, that's a huge factor. But I, you're looking at a team, no, because I think that Troy, Burnt Hill's core is young. Troy's core is younger.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because Burnt Hills is a bunch of sophomores
yeah.
essentially when you break it down.
So, Burnt Hill's core is young. Troy's core is younger.
Right.
Burnt Hill's core has some athletes with some physical gifts. Troy's core is more naturally athletically gifted at basketball. Guards are bigger, posts are bigger, longer, all like just kind of the physical tools and the measurables. That goes to Troy. Um, Burnt Hills has a couple kids that are basketball first, like Tanaya, Emma Larson, and then you've got your Maggie Lescolts and so on that are other sport that play basketball and they're helpful and they're effective basketball players, but they're other sports first. They're playing the sport 3 or 4 months a year. And Troy has a greater supply of basketball first young kids. So I look at their trajectory as a different one. If everybody stay like now we start talking about hypotheticals. Does Amaya Harris stay in Troy this entire time? Does Keanu Kiernan stay in Troy this entire time? Like there's a lot of different hypotheticals that go in that I'm not even comfortable talking about with eighth graders and all that stuff. But like, um, there's those other things at play. But I look at Troy's potential trajectory of being different. That's where I stand with it. Now that's potential is also the dreaded P word of basketball. If people, if I had $1 for every time someone, player, team, coach, whatever, hung their hat on potential that didn't pan out, another P phrase, if I had $1 for that, I'd be able to fill my gas tank for the next month.
Right.
But as far as what we're looking at with ceilings, Troy's got a different potential trajectory.
And then you're mentioning all those athletes as far as the difference between basketball dependent and multi-sport athletes. Then you have girls like Bryn Fitzmaurice at Greenville who can drop 40 but is going to college for tennis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyways, last double A question I have for you. Columbia, the win at West Genesee Friday. Is that a good win, a meh, or like a middle of the road win?
Expected. West Jenny's got some talent. They've been very. That's a conundrum of a team. They're every bit the conundrum of a team I thought Columbia was 2 years ago. Except the West Jenny kids are also seniors, so it's not like you can look at them and say, well, they're young, but it's a solid win. It's a good win in the sense of road trip to Syracuse. Different digs, right? Different court, different environment, different setting, different officials, different everything. West Jenny's one of those courts that doesn't have the walls right behind the rims, which is actually kind of like Columbia too. Columbia's got some space as well, but West Jenny's got one of those courts that isn't like the world's best shooters gym, so you get more experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing fellow upperclassmen that are, they have numerous future college basketball players on that team. And Columbia started slow. I think West Jenny was up 7 or 8, something, or 9, whatever, at the end of the first quarter. So you had an opportunity to respond from a bad start. So there was value to that. It wasn't anything that was unexpected.
Again, supreme forward thinking. Double A. Whoever wins Section 2 gets a golden pass to the regional final where they'll play Section 3. Is there anything stopping a Section 2 team in Double A getting to the Final Four?
It would be a pretty sizable upset if 2 got knocked off by 3 in Double A.
Okay.
With all due respect to the Section 3 Double A's, which is kind of like a crapshoot out there, the way that B is for us in 2.
Right.
Central Square, Henniger, Nottingham. I don't even freaking remember who else. We could even West Jenny. It's kind of a crapshoot out there, but whoever makes it out of 3 is definitely an underdog compared to whoever.
And just to further prove that point, there is not a single Section 3 team in the top 30 from the state sports writers rankings last week.
I don't have one in my 20.
Like the top, if to exclude the schools you don't use, the top 5 for the sports writers was well, you don't include Section 1 either, right?
I do include 1.
Okay. So top 6. Top 5. My counting was right. Hilton, Panis, Kearney, Aquinas, Columbia.
What'd you say? Hilton, Panis,
Kearney, Aquinas, Columbia.
4 of those 5 are in my top 5. I went Panis, Catholic Central, which I think that's where you saw. It's what's Catholic Central at?
Based on how you would rank, they are. Warwick is a 9. So eliminating who you usually don't have. You don't have Section 9, right?
I do have 9.
All right, so Warwick.
The only sections I don't have are 8 and 11.
All right, so it would go Columbia, Warwick, Catholic Central. So there's 7.
That's kind of an abomination. Yeah, I go Panis, Catholic High, Aquinas, Columbia, Hilton.
Okay.
No
Kearney.
I had him at one point. I had him in the top 5, or for a decent amount of time, I had him in the top 5. It was because they beat Aquinas. That's also a big sister, little sister complex out there.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think Aquinas is a little bit better overall, a little bit deeper, more weapons, comparable at the primary positions. But I think Aquinas is a little bit better. But Kearney came out here. They lost those 2 to Bethlehem and Averill Park. So I have them at 7. I'm going to drop them again. They're probably when my next group comes out, they're probably going to be around 10. One of my games on Saturday, I just went out to watch them play the Nichols School out of Buffalo, one of Monsignor Martin's. Should be a competitive game, and I would say Kearney wins maybe by a handful at home, 5 to 10 range. Full strength versus full strength. Nichols was missing 2 of its most important players, only dressed 6 and still won.
Damn.
Yeah. So BK's just gonna have to drop a little bit. But it was one of the more stunning games, more stunning games and results that I have seen in person in a very long time.
All right. AAA, here we go. Shaker, they decided to just casually drop 90 at Niskiuna on Friday. No big deal. Meanwhile, Shen gets a pair of wins where they held off a give me 1 second here. I'm just trying to open something quick. All right, here we go. Shen, they hold off Boston Spa by 10 and Bethlehem by 8, which were games 3 and 4 of their 6-game home stretch to close the season. Which opened with that crazy loss to Shaker. Since then, they beat Burn Hills, Spa, and Bethlehem, which sets up a heavyweight matchup Tuesday, tomorrow night against Albany. They are coming off wins last week over Averill Park, and at Boston Spa. Although the Boston Spa game was at Boston Spa, it was actually at MVP Arena.
Mm-hmm.
So my apologies for not noting that properly. And then we're set up. I mentioned Shaker. Another heavyweight matchup. They'll be playing Columbia tomorrow night as well. Same time, different gym as Shen Albany. They'll be playing at Columbia. So I'm sure you're feverishly in love with that scheduling. Complete sarcasm.
To those of you that are enjoying this on the outlet known as the YouTube, do you see that window that's behind my head? I'm about to jump out of it. Shaker Columbia, Shen Albany, Academy Catholic High at the same time?
Let me check. Hold on. Well, technically, Albany Catholic High starts at 6:30, but I see your point.
Oh, yay! Wow, I get to watch I get to watch JV overtime of Academy Catholic High before I get to go.
Oh man!
Exactly what happened between those two the first time
First
around.
time, yeah.
Jesus. Yeah. Whereas some of these other Tuesday Fridays, of like, fine. What?
Well, just compare it to this Friday. This Friday has. Let me look here. Well, Catholic Central was at Holy Name, so you weren't going to win either way there. Academy's at LaSalle. All right. Shaman at Niski at Albany. AP at Colony.
Isn't
That's your Friday night this week.
Isn't Shaker Columbia like for the league? Like that's for the Suburban Council Championship.
Double checking right now.
The winner,
yeah, they're both 9-1 in the
winner of that game wins the Suburban Council Championship.
Yep.
And then we got Shen Albany at the same time at Academy. I know that you can't necessarily, like, we don't know. Hindsight's 2020 and all. Oh, Lord. Killing me. I guess that means I'm going to stay local tomorrow.
Gee, I wonder why. You have your literal pick of the litter tomorrow between those 3 games.
Jeez, Lord.
And then and I mean, like, tomorrow, like, I'll add in a few other games because tomorrow is going to be super loaded. I'll throw in Holy Names at LaSalle.
Mm-hmm.
AP at Niski because AP still doesn't have Kaylee Ahern back, so that could be an intriguing matchup.
Absolutely.
And then you have the WAC Cup semifinals between Cobleskill at Northville and OESJ at BKW. I mean, tomorrow night is literally top to bottom classification-wise. It is a loaded night in girls basketball.
Adirondack League semis tomorrow too, if you're feeling
right. It's an absurd night of basketball tomorrow night.
Yeah, it is. It very much is. And there's, for as large as I am, there's still only one of me. I can't split myself in half.
We haven't perfected cloning Jeff Mlinar yet.
No. Yeah. So that's Tuesday for you. Yeah, I guess like I said, I guess I'm gonna be local.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
I don't know what I'm gonna do yet.
and really, I mean,
Is that Shaker game at Columbia? Is that at Columbia?
yes,
With all due respect, I love you guys, Columbia. I don't really love going to your gym.
because there's no cell phone reception really.
Yeah,
I should say they have difficult cell phone reception. Let me put it that way.
it's not my favorite.
And
The
here's the wild part. Tomorrow night. I mean, no offense to the Colony AP matchup on Friday. Tomorrow night's going to basically decide AAA seedings because
yes,
look at it this way, okay? Looking at the Suburban, okay. Shaker Columbia, like we said, 1-2, both 9-1. Basically, it's winner takes the conference, which right now puts Colony 3. If Albany beats Shen, that moves them into a tie for third with Colony. And Colony has the win in hand over Albany. And then if Shen wins, that gives them the win in hand, and they be tied for fourth with Albany. So basically, we're talking about the difference between the 4 and the 5 for Albany or Shen. We can pretty much lock in Colony as the 3 from the looks of it. And then, was it Guilderland, Saratoga, Schenectady? All right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Columbia's in the mix, so you just bump those a number.
I'm forgetting about Columbia being okay. I put Columbia in AAA for a second. So basically, you're looking at Shaker, assuming they win, they'll be the 1.
I think Shaker.
Shaker's honestly the 1 either way on.
Yeah, Shaker's gonna be the 1. It looks like they're pretty much all set to be the 1 either way.
I think you're basically at Shaker 1, Colony 2. Shen and Albany are playing for 3 or 4 tomorrow. Because whoever wins will have the win in hand. If Albany wins, they'll be a game better than Shen. If Shen wins, they'll be tied with Albany, but Shen would have the win in hand. So you would arguably say Shen gets the bump up, although the debate could come about non-conference scheduling. Because I would say Albany's might be in the realm of a little bit of a bump up there. And then the rest of AAA is Gilland, Saratoga, Schenectady. That, as is, I would say. Gilland 5, Saratoga 6, Schenectady 7. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much where we're at. I just way simplified that more than I thought I was. So let's go look at Shaker 1, Colony 2 right now. And whoever wins Albany Shen tomorrow gets the 3. Whoever loses gets the 4. Does that sound pretty spot on?
Yeah, I mean the only except if we're going down the rabbit hole of this week, I believe Albany. What's this? 2 league games left for them.
Yeah, at Shen and then home against Niskayuna.
If Albany wins both of those, that gives them a 10-2 record in the Suburban. If Colony loses to Averill Park, that will give them 9-3. So Colony already beat Averill Park in overtime, a game that I was at not that long ago.
Correct.
If I'm correct, it was actually a non-league game. Even though it was 2 league opponents, that was a non-league game. This one here is the league game.
Yes, you're correct.
So that would put, let's say Albany wins out, Colony loses. That makes Albany 10-2 in the league, Colony 9-3, which if I'm not mistaken, I think they have to seed an order of league of how you finish within your league, and then now granted, not that all that does, all it does. Who wears their home jerseys and who wears their away jersey at Hudson Valley?
Right. Who sits on what bench?
because one of you is going to play Schenectady and one is going to play Saratoga in the quarterfinals. So
Right.
who gets to sit on Brian Cady's right and who gets to sit on his left?
Literally, that's what it breaks down to.
That's all it's speculation. That's literally all it does.
Who do I introduce first? Who do I introduce second?
Yeah. But yeah, that's how that goes.
Yeah. The only argument out there is that Colony's losses would be AP Shaker, Columbia. Albany's losses would be Shaker and Colony.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking too far ahead of myself. Just throwing that out there. I think that's all I've got. Obviously, you mentioned you're going to be sticking around tomorrow, flipping 3 coins to see where you're going to go. Well, more than likely 1 coin from the sounds of it now that you mentioned Columbia and their cell reception. Anywhere else in particular you have circled on your calendar for Section 2 this week?
And and the lighting in the Columbia gym, not my favorite.
Is it a lot more mood lighting?
And there's some things. Although its lighting is bad, but it's not as bad as Boston Spa. Is there any gym that you've been in besides Boston Spa ever in your life where the lights are upside down? The lights are facing the ceiling.
I did not know that.
Next time, if you have not looked, next time you go into the Boston Spa gym, look up at the lights.
Okay.
And see the direction in which they're facing.
Okay.
And then tell me how much sense you think it makes.
That's funny because I had been in that gym a couple times before and never even thought about looking up. So, okay, I'll remember that.
So shout out to, and I think I had noticed it once in the past, but I know the person that really kind of brought it up to me was Mike Galuski, the Berkeley.
Shocker.
Berkeley mixtape.
Shout out Berkeley mixtapes.
He's like I brought up the lighting's upside down. I'm like, yeah, the lighting is like the lights are literally like they're blocked from the bottom. What you're seeing is the reflection of the lights that hit the ceiling.
Goodness gracious.
So that's almost as bad as the men's restroom at Elmira High School that has 2 stalls. Okay? And the stall on the wall end, the door was put on backwards.
Oh no.
So it locks from the outside.
Oh geez.
So not only can you not lock the door.
Let me guess, it cracks open as you're sitting there or standing there?
You can't lock it if you're actually using it. What if you're in there and somebody doesn't like you?
Right.
They just lock them, you're stuck. Now who put that door on? But more importantly, who put that door on, looked at it, and said,
"That's good.
All right, we're good."
Maybe they were a bully in high school and they were thinking about how can I help the bullies in Elmira High School? You know what? I'm gonna put this door on backwards.
We're just gonna roll with it. Like that just yeah, sure.
Oh goodness. That's funny.
Yeah, so that's my thing about Boston Spa and also the men's room at Elmira.
Shout out Elmira High School in your men's room. Good for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyways, back on topic. Anywhere else in Section 2 you got?
That is the topic.
Circled, starred, highlighted.
We're going off topic now. That is the topic. I'm on it now. Tonight, I think I'm going to do Stillwater Tamarack.
Yeah, that's just, and I'm always saying this because, not only because of this, but I know Stillwater's been playing really good ball this year. That might be a trickier game than a general Section 2 fan would think.
The bigger the court, the better for Stillwater, and Tamarack has like the smallest court in Section 2.
Right.
Right. So
Like
that
that, like them and Johnstown rank up there for me as like the two smallest gyms
Mhm.
in all of Section 2.
So that does not work well for Stillwater. Um, Now it's going to be difficult for a team. It's going to be difficult for Tamarack to score the ball probably against Stillwater, a team that matches up and has long, wiry athletes, and because it's smaller court, they're going to be able
Oh,
to.
let me add Dwaynesburg to the mix. That's 3.
Oh yeah, Dwaynesburg is tiny, but it's it'll be difficult for Tamarack to score the ball, but it's often difficult for them to score anyway. So more, I think it maybe impacts Stillwater more on the offensive end than it does Tamarack because they're kind of used to it.
Correct.
And the smaller court it's probably not going to entirely take away transition opportunities for Stillwater because it's an athletic bunch, but it will greatly limit those opportunities. Um, it's my head, I give Stillwater the upper hand, but it's a tricky game. It, almost in the same vein of when I watched Academy Holy Names round 1 and ended up being a 26-point game.
Mhm.
Usually I'm not itching to go watch round 2 of that game. But playing at Holy Names, I was, a little bit different as far as like, yeah, I could see myself like going to that game and looking forward to it.
And now I'm jealous because I just thought about how it's going to be Addison Thornton against Caleb Bedoin.
Yeah,
Damn it.
yeah. Um,
Okay.
so there's that. I think I'm doing that tonight. Late start, your typical Wazrin start, 7:30. Tuesday, I'm assuming I'm going to be local, but I've just have to make that decision as far as where. Maybe I do end up at Columbia anyways. Let's see how my new camera handled the Boston Spa gym way better than the old one did. So let's see how it handles the Columbia gym.
Okay.
So I might end up there. We'll see. Wednesday, I don't know.
Maybe LaSalle at Chalmont.
I have no idea. I'll have to figure something out. Thursday, I'm just at this point. I'm assuming that the schedule gets wiped with weather.
Yeah, I mean the only game I even noted anyways was Glens Falls at South Glens Falls. That's the only one that I took note of.
Yeah, so the rest of the week I've kind of been. The only other thought that I've had is go up to Watertown on Saturday they have the league up there, the Frontier League, with all of those schools. They have their finals for all of their divisions
Mm-hmm.
at Jefferson Community College on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only other thought that I've had kind of set in stone in my head for the rest of the week, but weather may impact that too. So,
You know what could be sneaky good? Well, not sneaky good because we've been keeping tabs on these two teams all year. But what could be sneaky good compared to the rest of the schedule for Friday? Shelmont at Voorheesville round 2.
yeah, that's one of the key ones locally for me on Friday.
Because obviously everyone's going to look at Catholic Central at Holy Names, Academy at LaSalle. There's maybe one or two suburban. AP at Colony, obviously. Maybe even Niski at Albany, but Shelmont at Voorheesville. I mean, I'm going to implore for those of you relatively close to the Voorheesville City School District or town. What is it? Town, village, city,
Village.
whatever. Whatever you are, whatever kind of city, town, village you are, if you are within a stone's throw of that district, don't overlook that game. That
No,
could be a very entertaining bowl game, especially if it's anything like the first one in Rotterdam.
yep. Go do your Valentine's Day festivities with your honey dip, and then go enjoy.
Or better, go because everybody's gonna be making their reservations probably for like between 5 and 7:30. Go to the game, then do your Valentine's Day. Do a late dinner.
There you go.
See?
Speaking of things on Valentine's Day that aren't really love fests, the one that I have on my radar for Friday is a non-Section 2 game, CNS Liverpool.
That's not exactly a love fest, but I get where you're going.
Nope. But that's one that I got my eye on for Friday, and that's
Oh,
one that Section 2 people, our triple A's, I'm sure would pay a little bit of attention to as well, because that's your 2-3 counterpart in triple A, and that's round 2 of what will, you know, inevitably, more than likely, inevitably be 3 rounds.
and those are two very interesting head coaches.
And the schools are natural rivals. That's a Shen Shaker or a Mechanical Stillwater or Shen Toga when they're both at a certain level, and CNS Liverpool. That's CNS has, in my day they had a chant. The student section had a chant towards Liverpool when things were doing well that I won't repeat on air. There's never love lost between, it's the natural rivalry. It's even better when they're both what they are right now.
I'm sure Seichin and Wheeler are just besties at this point. Anyways, that wraps up part 1 of episode 44 of 84 Feet with Cady and Cap this week. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment, whatever you want to do on YouTube. On the Spotify, become a subscriber to the channel. Give us a nice review. That'd be wonderful. At 84 Feet Podcast on X Twitter. At NYS Takeover on the X Twitter for Jeff. At Empire State Takeover on the IG for him. And just search for Empire State Takeover on Facebook. Or just flat out go on the website, EmpireStateTakeover.com. And by all means, subscribe to his all his reports, newsletters, etc., including the almighty Upstate 20 that comes out every week. Early to midweek, we'll call it, for Jeff and his site. That being said, make sure you stay tuned for part B coming out. It'll be Queensbury head coach Meg Bethel and senior Shea Canavan joining the program with me. So yeah, make sure you look out for that. In the meantime, that does it. Enjoy the week. Enjoy your Valentine's Day for all you lovers out there. And Jeff, I'll safe travels. I'll catch you next week. All right, man?
Sir.